In 1811, the leaders of New York City drew a map on a piece of paper. They drew a grid of straight streets. They drew 155 parallel streets going north and south. They drew 12 avenues going east and west. These men sold a dream to the American people. They said the grid would give everyone enough space to live a good life. This historical promise was a lie. The grid did not create space. The grid created a trap. For 100 years, millions of people came to New York City looking for a better life. They found a hard reality. The city took their money. The city took their time. The city took their health. Curiosity makes us ask why so many people believed this lie. The answer is hope. People wanted to believe in the fresh start. The map showed wide avenues. The map showed neat blocks. The contrast between the map and the real city was total. The real streets were narrow. The real blocks were full of trash. The real air smelled bad. A poor worker paid more money for a dark room in New York than a farmer paid for a whole house with land in Ohio. The expectation of cheap living was false. 3 men created the 1811 grid map. Their names were Gouverneur Morris, John Rutherford, and Simeon DeWitt. They planned the streets north of Houston Street. They did not plan parks. They did not plan schools. They only planned blocks to sell for money. They thought the city would grow slowly. They were wrong. A massive number of humans arrived fast. The city was not ready. The setup for a housing crisis was complete. The leaders had built a grid, but they forgot to build a home. The first big test came in the 1840s. A disease killed the potato crops in Ireland. Between 1845 and 1855, over 1 million Irish people left their country. Most of them came to New York City. They arrived with no money. They needed a place to sleep immediately. The city had no empty houses. The ships docked at the southern tip of Manhattan. The wealthy people lived just a few streets north in fine houses. But the Irish could not go there. Landlords took single-family homes. They cut the homes into tiny pieces. They put 4 families in a house built for 1 family. This building became known as a tenement. In 1850, a common laborer earned about $1 a day. A landlord charged $4 a month for 1 small room. A family of 6 people lived in this 1 room. They slept on the floor. They cooked on the floor. They had no running water. They had no toilet inside the building. The expectation of a private family life was gone. In 1855, another large group of people arrived. Over 50,000 German immigrants came to New York City in 1 year. They moved into a specific area. People called it Klein Deutschland, or Little Germany. It was in the Lower East Side. The population density in this area was shocking. In 1 single city block, over 2,000 people lived. The streets were so crowded that people had to walk in the middle of the road. The noise never stopped. Carts rolled over cobblestones. Vendors yelled to sell food. Babies cried in the windows. There was no peace. The competition for basic needs broke people down. Families had to fight for clean water. There was 1 water pump for an entire block. Women stood in line for hours just to fill a bucket. The competition for food was also hard. Bread cost 3 cents a loaf. Meat cost 10 cents a pound. If a man lost 1 day of work, his family did not eat. The expectation of plenty in America was a myth. The reality was a daily fight for a piece of bread. This tension built up layer by layer. The pressure on the human mind was heavy. In 1879, a man named James Ware changed the city. He designed a new type of tenement building. People called it the dumbbell tenement. If you looked at the building from above, it looked like a dumbbell weight. It had a wide part at the street. It had a wide part at the back. It had a narrow air shaft in the middle. The city government loved this design. The law said a room needed a window. Ware put a window in every room. The window faced the narrow air shaft. The law wanted fresh air. The design gave a window to a brick wall 5 feet away. People lived in the dumbbell tenement. The air shaft did not bring in air. The air shaft acted as a chimney. It pulled smells up from the lower floors. It pulled smoke from the cooking stoves. It pulled the smell of human waste from the outhouses in the yard. Families kept their windows closed to keep the smells out. The rooms became dark ovens in the summer. In the winter, the cold air froze the pipes. By 1900, there were over 40,000 dumbbell tenements in New York City. Over 1.6 million people lived in them. The expectation of safe housing was a failure. The reality was a dangerous box. The immigrants came for work. The city had work, but the work paid very little. The garment industry grew fast. Factory owners hired men, women, and children. The work happened in the tenements themselves. People called these home workplaces sweatshops. A family rented a room. They put sewing machines in the room. They worked for 14 hours a day. There were no safety rules. There were no fire escapes. The shock of the wage system kept people poor forever. In 1890, a woman sewing a shirt earned 3 cents for each shirt. She had to sew 20 shirts a day to make 60 cents. Rent took most of that money. The competition for these sweatshop jobs was fierce. If one woman asked for a raise, the boss fired her. There were 10 other women waiting outside the door to take her place. The children had to work too. A 10-year-old boy working in a dark basement making buttons earned 2 cents an hour. The expectation of moving up in the world was impossible. The reality was staying in the exact same room forever. How did a child grow up in this environment? In 1892, a group of doctors studied the children of the Lower East Side. They looked at 500 children. They found a shocking fact. 40% of the children had a disease called rickets. Rickets makes the bones soft and bent. The children did not get enough sunlight. The tenements blocked the sun. The children never played outside in the grass. A normal child ran in a field. A tenement child stood on a dirty sidewalk. The doctors measured the height of the children. The tenement children were 2 inches shorter than children from the country. Their bodies were small because their food was bad. They ate cheap bread and potatoes. They did not drink fresh milk. The milk in the city was often spoiled or watered down. The expectation of raising a strong family in New York was a lie. The city was breaking the bodies of the next generation. The tension in the city was not just about money, it was about physical survival. Some people tried. In 1876, a rich man named Alfred T. White built a new housing project in Brooklyn. He called it the Tower Buildings. He wanted to build good homes for poor workers. He added windows that faced the outside air. He added a real bathroom for every apartment. He added a courtyard in the middle for the children to play. The air was clean. The rooms were bright. Alfred T. White could not help everyone. His tower buildings only held a few hundred people. The city needed homes for millions of people. Building good homes cost too much money. The landlords who owned the dumbbell tenements wanted to make money. They did not want to spend money on clean air or nice courtyards. The expectation that private business would fix the housing problem failed. The reality was that greed won. The landlords got rich, the workers stayed poor. The tension in the city grew louder. A disaster had to happen to wake people up. It started with a disease. In 1866, a disease called cholera came to New York City again. Cholera spreads in dirty water. The tenements had open sewers in the streets. The disease killed people fast. A person could feel fine in the morning and be dead by the evening. Health workers walked into the tenements. In the rich areas, 5 people died out of every 1,000. In the tenement areas, 100 people died out of every 1,000. The death rate finally forced the city to act. The doctors found that 20 families shared one single toilet. They found dead animals in the basements. They found garbage piled high in the narrow air shafts. The city government passed a new law in 1867. This was the Tenement House Act. It said that every tenement must have a toilet for every 20 people. It said landlords must put garbage cans in the yards. The expectation was that this law would fix the problem. The reality was different. The landlords ignored the law. The city had no inspectors to enforce it. The suffering continued. Jacob Riis finally showed the truth to the world. He came to New York from Denmark in 1870. He was poor. He slept in police stations. He got a job as a reporter for a newspaper. Riis carried a new invention. It was a camera with flash powder. In 1888, Riis went into the dark tenements at midnight. He took pictures of the people sleeping on the floors. He took pictures of the dirty rooms. The city had two different worlds living side by side. In 1890, Riis published a book. He called it How the Other Half Lives. The book had his pictures. Rich people in New York bought the book. They sat in their warm houses and looked at the pictures. They saw a family of 7 living in a room 6 feet wide. They saw children sleeping on the dirt floor. They saw a man drinking from a puddle in the street. The rich people felt shame. The expectation that the poor were just lazy was destroyed by the camera. The reality was that the city was starving its own people. The book reached the desk of Theodore Roosevelt. Roosevelt was a police commissioner in New York City at the time. Roosevelt was shocked by the pictures. He called Jacob Riis to his office. Roosevelt went with Riis to the tenements at night. They walked into the dark buildings. They smelled the air shafts. Roosevelt said he could not unsee what he saw. He became a fighter for the poor. The political reaction was huge. In 1894, the state of New York created a special group. They called it the Tenement House Committee. A rich man named Robert DeForest led the group. They spent months walking through the tenements. They measured the rooms. They counted the people. They wrote a report in 1895. The report said the Dumbbell Tenement was the worst building in the world. It had to be stopped. The expectation was that the government would side with the landlords. The reality was that the government finally sided with the people. The year was 1901. The state passed a new law. It was the Tenement House Act of 1901. This was a turning point in history. The law banned the dumbbell tenement. No one could build a dumbbell tenement ever again. The law said every new room must have a window that opens to the outside street or a real yard. The law said every apartment must have a private toilet inside the unit. The 1901 law cared about human life. The old laws only cared about making money. The people realized the law did not help them right away. The 1901 law only applied to new buildings. There were 40,000 old tenements still standing. The poor people still lived in the old dumbbell buildings. The landlords did not tear down the old buildings. They kept renting them. The law also had a dark side. To pay for the new indoor toilets, the landlords raised the rent on the new buildings. The workers could not afford the new rent. The expectation of a quick fix was false. The reality was a slow, painful change. The resolution was not a happy ending. It was just the end of the beginning. But the city was not done changing. The physical buildings were just one part of the trap. A new force was entering the city. This force was invisible. It was about how people thought. It was about how people dressed. It was about how people acted. The brick walls of the tenement were slowly replaced by glass towers, but the pressure on the human mind only got worse. A new kind of competition was born. It was not about finding a room to sleep in. It was about finding a place in the social order. The story of the buildings was over. The story of the lifestyle was about to begin. 1920 brought a new feeling to New York City. The physical tenements were still there, but a new idea took over the minds of the people. The idea was about lifestyle. The expectation was that anyone could live a rich life. The reality was that the pressure to look rich was harder than the work itself. The tease of a perfect life hung in the air. The setup for a new kind of trap was ready. The city no longer just took a worker's sweat. The city now wanted a worker's mind. But how poor workers afforded nice things? The answer is, they did not. A store called R.H. Macy & Company on 34th Street sold fine silk dresses. A factory worker made $25 a week. The rent for a simple apartment took $10. A silk dress cost $15. The stores offered a new way to pay. It was called the installment plan. Let's understand this installment plan. A worker could take the dress home today. The worker paid $1 a week until the dress was paid off. This plan was new in 1923. In the past, people only bought what they could pay for in cash. The workers added up their weekly bills. They owed money to 5 different stores. Their entire weekly paycheck went to paying for last month's clothes. The expectation of owning nice things was real. The reality was a permanent state of debt. Let us look at a single pair of women's silk stockings. In 1924, a pair cost $1.50. A woman working in a typing pool earned $18 a week. She bought the stockings. She wore them to work. The other women saw the stockings. The other women felt the need to buy the same stockings. The competition was not for a job anymore. The competition was for a look. The tension in the office building rose layer by layer. The pressure to fit in was heavy. In the 1920s, men built the Chrysler Building. It opened in 1930. It was 1,046 feet tall. Men built the Empire State Building. It opened in 1931. It was 1,454 feet tall. These buildings were the tallest in the world. The expectation was that these buildings held great power and success. The buildings were made of strong steel and stone. The men inside felt weak. There was silence inside the offices. Thousands of men sat at small desks in giant rooms. They did not talk. They stared at papers. These were the new white-collar workers. They wore dark suits. They carried leather briefcases. They did not work with their hands. The pressure was the same. The clock hit 5 in the evening. The office workers did not go home happy. They went to bars. They drank alcohol to forget the stress of staring at numbers all day. The expectation of an easy office job was a lie. The reality was a mental strain. The year was 1929. The stock market was the main topic in the city. People said the market would only go up. The expectation was that everyone could make free money. The shock happened on October 29. People called it Black Tuesday. The stock market crashed. It lost $14 billion in one day. The news spread fast. Men stood outside the New York Stock Exchange on Broad Street. Their faces were blank. They had lost all their money. The banks closed. On December 11, 1930, a large bank called the Bank of United States closed its doors. It had 400,000 depositors. The people could not get their savings. The opportunity the city promised vanished in a few hours. The crash started the Great Depression. The expectation of keeping up with fashion stopped. The stores on 34th Street went dark. The installment plans failed. People could not pay their weekly dollar. A man had a good job on Monday. He lost his job on Tuesday. By Wednesday, he could not pay his rent. In 1933, the unemployment rate in New York City reached 25%. 1 out of every 4 people had no job. Let us look at an apple. In 1930, a man stood on a street corner in New York City. He wore a torn suit. He held a bunch of apples. He sold each apple for 5 cents. This man was an accountant last year. He worked in a tall skyscraper. Now he stood in the cold. There were thousands of apple sellers in New York City. The apple became the sign of the broken expectation. They could not buy it. They had to wait in line for free food. Charities set up bread lines. A restaurant called Tommy's on Union Square gave out free soup. In the past, people sat at cloth tables. Now, men stood in the snow for 3 hours to get a slice of bread and a bowl of soup. There were former bankers. There were former lawyers. There were former factory owners. The Great Depression did not care about a person's status. It hurt everyone. In the 1920s, people competed for silk stockings. In the 1930s, people competed for a piece of bread. The expectation of moving up in a career was gone. The reality was just trying to stay alive. The contrast between the loud jazz music of the previous decade and the quiet hunger of the current decade was loud. The city ran out of money to help. The shelters were full. The hospitals turned away sick people who could not pay. Fiorello LaGuardia became the mayor of New York City in 1934. The city was dying. LaGuardia was short. He had a loud voice. He hated the corrupt men who ran the city before him. The expectation was that the new mayor would fix the money problem fast. But he could not fix it with magic. He had to beg the federal government for money. Franklin Roosevelt became president. He created a program called the Works Progress Administration. People called it the WPA. The WPA gave jobs to people in New York City. Over 300,000 people in New York City got a WPA job. The expectation was that these would be hard labor jobs. The WPA hired artists, it hired writers, it hired musicians. The government paid people to paint pictures in subway stations. The city got new parks. Workers finished the Triborough Bridge. Workers finished the Lincoln Tunnel. It opened in 1937. But the workers still felt the lifestyle pressure. A WPA job paid less than a factory job. The men felt shame. The United States entered World War II. The expectation was that the war would bring more hard times to the city. The war saved the city's economy. The factories opened again. They made uniforms. They made bullets. They made parts for airplanes. There was sudden change in lifestyle. The people who stood in bread lines in 1935 had full wallets in 1942. The competition for jobs ended. There were more jobs than people. The city had money again, but the lifestyle pressure changed shape. During the war, the government rationed food. The government gave out War Ration Book 1 in 1942. People could not buy sugar without a government stamp. They could not buy meat without a stamp. They could not buy new shoes without a stamp. The people started buying things they did not need. They bought things just because they had a stamp for it. The competition shifted back to getting goods. Let us look at another pair of stockings. In 1939, a company called DuPont invented nylon stockings. Women loved them. They were cheaper than silk. They lasted longer. In 1942, the government took all the nylon for the war. They made parachutes and ropes. Women could not buy nylon stockings. Nylon went back on sale. 40,000 women rushed to stores in New York City in one day. They fought in the aisles. The lifestyle pressure returned in full force the moment the war stopped. The war was over. The soldiers came home. The expectation was a quiet, peaceful life. The advertising firms on Madison Avenue grew very powerful. A firm called Young and Rubicam made millions of dollars. These firms learned from the installment plans of the 1920s. The advertisers sold a complete lifestyle. They did not just sell a car, they sold the idea that a man needed a car to be a good father. They did not just sell a television set, they sold the idea that a family needed a television to be happy. In 1948, 100,000 television sets sat in New York City living rooms. The advertisers targeted the white-collar workers. They told them to leave the city. They told them to buy a house in Long Island. A man named William Levitt built a town called Levittown in 1947. It had cheap houses. A house cost $7,990. The mortgage payment was $58 a month. In the 1950s, millions of people left New York City. They left the old tenements. They left the new apartments. The city lost its tax money. The expectation of the city as the only place to live was dead. The reality was that the city was now a place people wanted to escape. The people who stayed were the ones who could not leave. The poor people stayed. The minority groups stayed. The advertisers did not make ads for them. City planner Robert Moses built the Long Island Expressway. It started in 1949. The highway made it easy for white workers to drive to their new homes. The physical trap of the 1901 tenements was replaced by a mental trap. The city told the people they were failures if they stayed. The lifestyle pressure was no longer about silk stockings. It was about your zip code. It was about your address. If you lived in the city, society said you were not successful. The opportunity in New York City always came with a demand. In the 1800s, the city demanded physical labor. In the 1900s, the city demanded mental labor. By the 1950s, the city demanded a specific lifestyle. You had to buy the right clothes. You had to work the right office job. You had to move to the right neighborhood. The advertisers always moved the target. As soon as a family bought a house in the suburbs, the advertisers told them they needed a second car. As soon as they bought a second car, the advertisers told them they needed a bigger house.